Thank you. So I'm going to be referring to my phone here a little bit because I forgot my cheat sheet, so I had to have my supervisor text it to me. So that'll keep me on track. If I go blank, I'll refer to this. So I wanted to explain to you guys a little bit about Northwest Pilot Project and our history. We were started in 1969 as an all-volunteer organization when there was not any sort of organizations that helped senior citizens or low-income homeless people. And so it just sort of morphed into starting as a volunteer organization and morphed into what it is today. And we today serve people who are 55 and older, who live in Multnomah County or are homeless and are not responsible for any children under 18 in their household. So our niche is really the poorest of the poor and senior citizens. And in the last, beginning of February, we changed the way that we do our process for seeing people. For many years, we did what we call walk-ins, and people would access our services by showing up hours early. We would come out at 9 o'clock, and we would have a lobby full of anywhere from 10 to 20 people who were trying to access our services. People would get there sometimes at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and wait until our lobby opened at 8 o'clock, and then wait until 9 o'clock and see if they even made the cut at 9 o'clock. And then if they didn't make the cut, they'd have to try it again. And then even if they did make the 9 o'clock cut, sometimes they would have to wait still a couple more hours in order to see somebody while they see the 8 people that we're really only able to see. So we were kind of feeling like that was a little bit of a setup, because people would finally get into the office and there really wouldn't be anything available as far as housing goes, if that's what they're looking for. If they were looking for housing and they're homeless or they need to move out of where they are, as we all know, subsidized housing has really long waits, and even affordable housing has waits. And so what we've done is we have changed our process, and we currently do all phone assessments. So the way that the process works is we have INR, which is information and referral, and I think there's 6 housing specialists at Northwest Pilot Project. We all do different duties every day where we're either on the phone doing phone assessments with people in lieu of seeing people in person. And depending upon what comes out of that assessment, they might either need rent assistance, which at that point we would have done a full assessment and either approved or not approved them for rent assistance. And if you have questions on how we approve people, we'll go over that later. Or then we'll make an appointment for them to come in for rent assistance. So they'll either get rent assistance, maybe they just are homeless or are looking for new housing. So we offer what we call Housing 101, which is a class that we put on at Northwest Pilot Project on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we explain to people the different types of housing that are available. We give them these brochures that I've handed out to you guys. And we go over all the different types of housing that are available for them to apply to, how to apply, and we let them know that if they need help with applications, that they can come back and we can help them with applications. We have drop-in hours. If it ends up that somebody really needs individual case management that we can see while they're in that Housing 101, then at that point we can set them up for an individual case management appointment where they'll just meet one-on-one with a housing specialist. And so out of that INR assessment on the phone, it's rent assistance, it's Housing 101, it's case management, or I think that's it. Yeah, case management. So that's how people are able to access our services right now at Northwest Pilot Project. And people can come into the office and fill out an INR form and be able to get in the loop of our assessments over the phone. Or if somebody's available right then we'll be able to see them right then and kind of do an assessment with them, figure out what their needs are.
So they can call in,
Yeah.
or they can
Well, it's best to call
They
it,
call.
but for people who don't have phones,
Right.
because people don't have phones,
Right.
they might stop into the office.
Okay.
And then they will take their information,
Okay.
and if somebody's able to see them right then, since they don't have a phone, we'll either, visit with them right then, kind of figure out what their needs are, or set up a case management appointment, depending upon, what their situation is and what their needs are.
So for Housing 101, you
Yeah.
need to register for it?
Yeah, you need to
Can't
have a
just
phone.
show up?
You can't just show up. We really need somebody to call in first and kind of have a file started for them in the computer. And then we schedule those appointments for the Housing 101. And we take down, I think, like 13 appointments, yeah.
How did you get the message out that they use the phone system now instead of just showing up?
We contacted our partner agencies. We notified 211 months ahead of time. We put notes on our door and just tried to get the word out ahead of time. And come that first week where we weren't doing walk-ins, we only had a handful of people, if that, show up. So people weren't really mad. We were worried, how's this gonna work? And it's still kind of trial and error to try to figure out, if it's working. Are we missing people that are trying to access services that aren't able to access services? But so far, it's really working out well.
Well, it sounds a lot more efficient.
Yeah, it is a lot more efficient. People would be really angry and frustrated and really impatient after waiting for so long when they're already stressed out. If
You've
they're
been out there
in
for
need
4
of.
hours.
Yeah, it was a lot of calming people down, and it was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard for them and for us. And so, yeah, did you have a question?
No.
Oh. And so I put together the affordable housing options that are out there for people to either apply to or to either know about, because as we all know, not all affordable housing options are available right now. So I'm going to go over this pamphlet right now, this permanent housing options. And the first box here on the sheet is the light blue box. And this is open market apartments, which is just regular apartments that people can apply to. And we have put together a list of open market affordable housing in Multnomah County that's broken down by area. And these list the prices, and some, as you can see, are affordable, some are not. But some people have varying degrees of income, where some people have just the 733 SSI, whereas some people have maybe up to 1,500 or so. And so depending upon what their budget is, this is the list that we have for affordable housing. And the process to apply is to, most places on this list take applications and put you on a wait list. There are a handful of places in here where you cannot submit an application and get on a wait list. They only take applications when people are moving out. So at that point, it becomes a rush to try to get your application in, be the first one to get an application in if there's an apartment available. All these places have application fees that run between $35 and average $45 that people need to pay once their name comes up on the wait list. The rental criteria is determined by the management company and the manager of the individual buildings, so all of them may vary a little bit. And there's also some tax credit buildings listed in here where the rent is slightly lower than market rate. And that's where if it's a tax credit building, the owners get a tax credit for offering affordable housing. And all these buildings accept Section 8 vouchers if somebody has a Section 8 voucher. And the next is, on the list is the HUD buildings, subsidized housing, which is the yellow sheet. So this is a list, yes?
So each one they apply for, do they have to pay the background check, or is it just one?
They pay an application fee once their name comes up on the wait list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's for everything that they applied for or
Yep.
filled out? So
Yeah,
they don't have to
everything
continue?
that they apply for, once their name comes up on a wait list for open market buildings,
Okay.
that's when they then pay the application fee
Okay.
for the background check.
So,
Oh,
as an example,
you
if
don't pay
you're
for
applying
each.
at 3 different places, you'd pay an application fee at each of those places.
Not not as soon as you submit the application.
But as soon as your
As soon
name
as your
comes up
name
on that
comes up.
list.
But ideally, you wouldn't, once your name comes up on the first place, you would pay that application fee, and then if you got accepted, you would move in. You wouldn't need to deal with those other
Right.
buildings and the application fees. If you got denied, then you would work on doing an appeal or a reasonable accommodation or whatever the situation is. So people really shouldn't have to go around and pay application fee after application fee after application fee. Because typically, a lot of times, the same thing's gonna happen over and over again when they're getting denied for some specific reason that's coming up on their background check.
Can the background check be used for all of the buildings you go to, or they have a new one each time?
They have a new one each time.
Do they have to pay for the background check?
Yes, they pay an application fee, which is
That include the background?
Yeah, that's what the fees, the application fees, the background check. Yeah. And then there's subsidized housing, which is HUD, where the apartment owners contract with the federal government to receive, by offering affordable housing where people pay 30% of what their income is towards rent. It's approximately 30%. And this is the list, again, broken down by area. And this is what has really long waits. So in order to qualify to apply to subsidized housing, you need to be 62 or older or disabled. There are no application fees for subsidized housing. Each building maintains its own wait list and has its own application and application process. And the rental criteria varies by building to building, and typically a background check goes back about 7 years. And the waiting time varies for each building. Some buildings have, well, average I would say is a year, up to some of them are really long, up to 10 years.
Well,
Yeah.
Now, the only people you're able to help are those who live in Multnomah County who are homeless. But these all apply to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Even though you couldn't help them with it.
Absolutely. Anybody can apply.
County, for example.
Yeah, if somebody lives in Clackamas County or a different county, anybody can come and apply to these buildings. Yeah. Just our organization only helps people who live in Multnomah County or are homeless. So, and on this list of subsidized housing, there are some buildings that prioritize for people who are 62 and older. So if somebody applies and they're over 62, they're going to go to the top of the wait list, along with the other people who are 62 and older who applied also. So there's still waits. And then there are some buildings that you can only be 62 or older to apply to. Any questions about subsidized housing? Okay. And then there's, on the green box on this sheet here, there's project-based housing, which is where the subsidy is also held at the building, but you do not have to be disabled to apply. So anybody can apply to these buildings to get the subsidy. But a lot of these buildings, their wait lists are closed. And as you can see, there's just really not very many project-based Section 8 buildings available to even apply to.
Then places like Stevens Creek Crossing in Southwest, that is a home forward closed place now?
I think Stevens Creek is home forward, and all their wait lists right now are closed. All the public housing, which it talks about also in the little box over here, home forward public housing. That whole wait list is closed. And I think when the wait list is under a year, that's when they open it back up, and certain buildings, they'll open the wait list where you can apply, and it's only for a certain amount of days, and then they close the wait list, and then you're on the wait list. Yeah. And as we all know, Section 8 voucher, that program right now is also closed, and that's where you can take, if you get a voucher, you can take it around to different buildings to apply and get the subsidy. So instead of the subsidy being held at the building, like this is where the subsidy is held at the building, the Section 8 voucher you can take to different buildings that you're interested in to get the subsidy. But again, that program is closed.
I have heard something about every building has to accept Section 8 vouchers. What's
Yes,
that about?
yes, they do. So they can't discriminate now against Section 8 voucher holders. So all these apartments, any apartment, they're required to take people who have Section 8 vouchers.
Now, if I want to get a condo in the Pearl or something with my Section 8 voucher, now, would I pay the difference between what Section 8 pays and market rate, or how does that work?
You would pay 30% of what your income is
Oh, really?
towards rent, yeah. And the federal government would pay the difference.
But there's a max, right? We run into that sometimes. Sometimes one person had moved into an apartment and then found out for her area in Gresham that
Yeah.
it was over the maximum that HUD allowed. And so she had, a personal advocate helped her negotiate that to be able to stay in that apartment.
Yeah, that's right. So there's payment standards that they have. So, and it's broken down by zip code in each area. They'll pay for studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, up to a certain amount. And if you're interested in that information, I think you can pull it off of Home Forward's website. But if you guys need it, I can email it to Brianna and get it for you.
I was thinking it somehow can open up the market for people. They don't have to go with the 30% of income level, because right now it's like you're out there waiting for a tent to open up.
Well, that's only, yeah, if you have a voucher.
Yeah, but you have, I have one client right now that has a voucher and wants to move
Uh-huh.
and is not sure of what's available.
And the Home Forward website has some openings.
Yeah.
But it is still limited
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard. It's very hard to find a place right now.
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah, for anybody, even with a Section 8 voucher. But Home Forward does list places that have vacancies. It's not always accurate,
Yeah.
but I found it lately to be really helpful. When you call those places, maybe they don't have one right at that moment, but maybe in a couple weeks. And there's also Housing Connections. Do you guys use Housing
Yeah,
Connections?
so it's mainly, so most of you who are out working with people one-on-one, you don't use Housing Connections. It's really the handful of us that are on the phone
Yeah.
that do.
Yeah.
And it's a real resource for us.
Yeah.
But the Housing Connections, they don't have the voucher box anymore. They took that out. It's
That's
only
because
in-
everybody takes them.
Oh,
Yeah. They used to have a little box that you could check that says accept Section 8
Right.
vouchers,
It's-
but now everybody has to accept a Section 8 voucher.
okay, that's why.
Yeah.
So if you're ever working with someone and they're wondering, well, what waiting lists are open for affordable housing, they can always call Elders in Action and we can do a search for them and give them the best information we have about open wait lists.
Yeah.
Question,
Yeah.
when you say everybody, is it the places that are on these lists or any apartment house in the city or county has to take Section 8?
Any apartment, anyone has to take Section 8.
So any apartment comes open in the whole county,
Mm-hmm.
then our clients can apply for that
Yeah.
and they're going to be on the pecking order, basically first come, first served. is
Yep.
that-
So my question is the same, so that goes all the way down to private houses, duplexes, triplexes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you hear that Sally asked about
You might
duplexes?
repeat the question, it's a little bit louder. too.
Yeah, that heater,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the duplexes, triplexes, private home rentals, does all that include? And Mary Lee said yes.
Yeah.
But
And then
do they accept them or do they not? I know they have to accept them, but they
Yeah.
can still decline you if you have a voucher, right?
I don't think they can decline you if you have a voucher.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that starts to become a fair housing issue.
Yeah.
Right,
So-
not on
Right.
that basis,
yeah,
But,
yeah.
right.
Because that's, it would be discrimination.
right, but
What that's exactly.
we don't know that.
Yeah.
How,
Oh, depending upon what they're denying you for, I
Yeah.
suppose. If there's
Right.
other reasons why you're getting denied, and there's a basis for it, once you apply.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, sometimes there's sly discrimination that maybe
right.
they're trying to not get caught.
Are you going to talk about why people get denied, is that, or what are the things
Yeah.
that people get?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of people get denied because of criminal backgrounds, property debt, evictions. So every building has their own criteria. Typically, evictions, you need to be 3 years eviction-free. And depending upon the crime, it's average 7 years. There are some crimes where I think if they're 10 years, you have to be off your record. And then there are people who are registered sex offenders. There's very few housing for people who are registered sex offenders. And the appeals process for people who are being denied. If somebody gets denied because they have a possession charge, let's say, from 3 years ago, and it needs to be 7 years free off of their record. And since then, that person has gone through treatment and counseling and done really everything that they need to do to remedy that situation. That would be good grounds for what we call a reasonable accommodation, which is what I have printed off on the white packet that I gave you guys. We would write a reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation is for people who have disabilities and where there needs to be, you have grounds for writing an appeal for them because they remedy the situation. And a lot of times we can get denials overturned with reasonable accommodations if they have remedied their situation. Kind of depends upon the management company or the owner. But a lot of times this is how we get people approved into housing who have been denied. And we have a pretty good success rate of getting people's denials overturned with writing reasonable accommodation and appeal letters. So if they're disabled, you can write a reasonable accommodation letter. And I put some sample letters in here. And I think that anybody can write a reasonable accommodation. So if you guys were able to wanted to write a reasonable accommodation, the trick I think would be having the backup documentation, which is one thing that we always get also. So you went through treatment, so what I want you to get is a letter from your counselor or the treatment center stating that you went through treatment and the dates and that you graduated and just anything that would be advantageous for that client. We submit that along with a reasonable accommodation. One of the things that we do at Northwest Pilot Project, since subsidized housing is such a long wait, sometimes what we'll do first is have people move into transitional housing. So let's say if somebody has zero income and they're really going to be waiting for permanent, long-term subsidized housing, and they don't have any money, we create a plan for them by first entering sometimes the shelter system. So they can go into shelter. If they're male, they can stay at the Clark Center shelter or any of the other transition project shelters for up to 4 months while they're working with a case manager on a housing plan. Lately, 4 months is really not even enough time to create a housing plan since housing takes so long. But one of the great things about Northwest Pilot Project is that when people come into our agency and become a client, and they have zero income or they're a medical priority, we put them on a list that we have at Northwest Pilot Project for that. What it does for the client is we have contracts with different buildings around town so that when they have vacancies, we get access to those vacancies. And those vacancies would be either transitional housing or permanent subsidized housing. So eventually, not always within 4 months' time of being in a shelter, but eventually their name would come up on our internal wait list, which becomes really a really good plan for our clients. So we would be able to move them into transitional housing, and we would be able to pay their rent while they wait for permanent subsidized housing. And the funding from that would come either from federal funding, or city or county funding, state funding, or we get a lot of private donations. And so we have a lot more flexibility than a lot of other agencies because we do get those private donations. So we would be able to pay for their housing while they wait for permanent subsidized housing through that funding. And any other
Marilee?
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of people fall through the cracks in this. So there, I don't know how many fall through the cracks, but even in terms of doing all the paperwork and all that, are those the kind of people that are likely to be homeless?
Yeah, they are, and a lot of times some people fall through the cracks maybe due to mental illness and ongoing drug and alcohol problems. And if they're not willing to address those issues, sometimes they are out there on the street for a very, very long time. Yeah. But that's what we really want to try to prevent at Northwest Pilot Project is people slipping through the cracks. So we hope to address those people and help them, which I think we do a pretty good job. But there's always going to be people who slip through the cracks.
I had a client who was a convicted sex offender, came out of prison, and was able to find housing. His PO found housing for him in an apartment building which was basically all sex offenders. That was specialized treatment. Are there such things as people with minimal mental disabilities, things like that, who are more at risk than the average person?
Well, are there housing available for that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking? Not very much. I would want that resource from you. I want to know the name of that. But there are some programs, the one that I can think of off the top of my head is called New Transitions. And it's for people who are recently out of prison, who are, I think, on parole, and it's group housing, and they take registered sex offenders, but it does cost, so people need to have income. Yeah. And as far as mental health goes, housing for people with mental health issues, Cascadia has housing for people with mental health issues, but not very much. Really, the mental health system still seems pretty broken. Not very many good resources, and that's really the most difficult thing about trying to house people at Northwest Pilot Project. If somebody comes in with mental health issues, as you guys may have seen, they don't really associate themselves with being mentally ill, and until they're ready to address that, then there's a lot of times not things that can be done. Kind of has to be done on a situation-by-situation basis, really.
So a question. So we get a phone call and somebody's 72 years old and their rent increase, so they can no longer afford their rent. Oh, so we get a phone call, somebody's, an example, 72 years old, they have a rent increase, and they can no longer afford their rent, so they receive an eviction notice. So we refer them to you, and there's no housing available, so what happens?
So what we would do in that situation is if that person, they have income, obviously, so we would maybe have some funding available where we would be able to pay the difference for them in their housing while they wait for maybe 2 or 3 months for their name to come up on another housing list or to go out and find another apartment.
So it's 2 or 3 months?
Oh, I mean, average? I mean, but really you could go out today and maybe find an apartment that's going to come available at the end of the month, just depending upon what you can afford. So it would really depend on what their income is, how much they can afford for rent with their budget. And that
They make $795 a
So if
month.
they make $795, is this a real situation right now?
Well, we get many of those
Yeah.
situations,
And
so.
let's say if they can afford like $500 for rent, what I would do is I would have them apply to the Hamilton West or the Gretchen Kafori and probably wait like 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah. And hopefully we would have funding where we could keep them in their housing for a few months. Otherwise, there really wouldn't be anything that they could do.
And so you wouldn't recommend they apply for the subsidized housing so
Oh,
they
yeah.
can stay where they are?
Well, no, that's not an option.
Okay.
Because if they're in, subsidy is held at the building, at a different building. So if they're in a regular apartment and they don't have a Section 8 voucher,
Okay.
which that program is closed, they wouldn't be able to apply for any subsidy in their current apartment.
Okay.
We always recommend that people apply for subsidized housing, the yellow sheet, where the subsidy is held at the building. Yeah.
I think that is really confusing, right? If you have a voucher,
It is.
you can take it to different places, right? Although, we still only have a 1% vacancy rate in Portland, so there aren't a lot of places, period. But otherwise, other buildings, and that voucher means you pay about 30% of your income in rent. Then there are buildings where you pay 30% of your income in rent. It might be all of a building or some units in a building, right? So that you'll hear about all these situations when you're working on different cases. So, does that make it clear? There's so many different programs out there.
When you say the program is closed, do they give new Section 8 vouchers? Or they do?
No, so the program, the wait list is closed right now, and there are people on the waiting list.
To get a Section 8 voucher?
Yep, to even apply to get on the waiting list, it's closed.
Not the building, just a voucher?
Just the voucher.
So if you have one, you're in luck. If not,
Yeah.
out of
It's
luck.
the golden ticket.
But otherwise, you go to one of these buildings, and if they have an open waiting list, you get on their waiting list.
Even if you don't have a voucher?
Right,
Yes,
that's
which
by
is what-
building.
Which is what this list is.
Okay.
These buildings, the subsidy is held at the building. So you apply to get into one of these units, and then your rent will be discounted. You pay 30%.
But
of what
it's
your
about
rent is.
impossible to get one.
It's not impossible.
No.
So if someone is 62 or older and they need subsidized housing as soon as possible, I have them apply to 2 buildings downtown. One is the Lexington and one is the Park Tower. And their building runs average wait list 3 months if you're 62 or older. All the other wait lists are about 2 years, and they all vary.
Okay, I'm out of the loop.
Okay.
So my question is, you have a 62-year-old who's in dire need of housing.
Yeah.
And you refer them to one of those 2 buildings you
Yeah.
just mentioned, and they apply.
Yeah.
But they don't have a voucher.
So they don't need a voucher for this.
Oh,
The subsidy is held at the building.
okay.
Yeah.
Vouchers you can take anywhere, but some buildings
Yeah.
are 30% of your income.
Oh, okay.
So if we
It's
have,
hard.
sorry.
Vouchers are like gold, and they're very difficult to get. Is that correct?
Yes.
They'll open up the list in a few years, and then there'll be a lottery to get on again.
So if
So
we
if you have one, you want to keep it for whatever you can do.
Yeah, you don't want to lose that voucher.
If we have a client, should we call you for them, or just tell them to call you?
Depending upon what the situation is, they can call us, and we can do a assessment on the phone for them. And did you have a question, ma'am? Okay.
So I have a question. How many phone calls do you receive a day, an average, for people?
I don't know. So our receptionist does a lot of these, writes down all the INR calls all day long. I don't know how many an hour. 10, I don't know.
Are you connected in with
I'll get that
ADRC?
answer for you.
ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Connection?
What was that?
Okay, there's ADRC in the counties, which is a state-run process with local regions, where a person calls a 988 number, they tell their problem, they're 60 or older, they go into what amounts to a database, which can be transferred from agency to agency, so they don't have to wander around themselves getting lost. And it's primarily county agencies. I don't know if you guys get referrals from them.
Oh, yeah, they're in there.
They're in
I don't know about
You're in
ADRC.
there.
You're in there.
I don't know about ADRC.
You're in there.
Okay, all right, great.
So, let me know that, ADRC,
Yeah.
Aging and Disability Resource Connection.
And veteran services.
And yes, the ADV, yeah, right, those guys. And it's a way to get people efficient services without getting them all bogged down and
Yes.
without agencies duplicating effort or falling between the cracks. It's under still continuing review. It's been about a couple of years in action. And it's a really useful service because people don't have to get lost. They talk to one person, it's a live person, 24/7. If you call after hours, you're actually talking to a counselor, someone.
Yeah, it's
who
a
can do-
helpline.
It's a helpline.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful helpline. And the idea being, if you're an agency that's connected to it, you get part of the deal, and people don't have to wander around looking for housing any more than they do anyway.
Well,
And it's the same database we use for resources, and plus we can offer them a personal advocate. So we like people to call us. And then the other thing is that we are gonna have a demo on it. But I just always like to say, especially for the new folks, I do not expect you to be an expert on the ADRC. Connie and I use it every day. Habiba's had a little training on it. It's not, you need to use it more regularly because you have to know the keywords. right, Will? I mean,
Yeah,
you just have
doing it
to.
online, it's definitely call elders and let elders do the work for you.
Well, or at least don't feel like you have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
You can certainly do it, but we are gonna have a demo in a couple months on it. Sorry.
Yeah, and even in that situation, we would still be doing our own assessment though.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
All right, what other questions?
I do have a question here. REM plus utilities, so some of these older buildings, the utilities are included, but some you have to pay all your own utilities, so how does that work?
Well, they would just pay their own electric bill, so if they're in an.
What if you have to pay your utilities too?
Yeah, so they would pay utilities.
What if utilities are 30% of your income? I was thinking that.
So they would just pay their own electric bill.
Okay. And then you,
Somehow they calculate that into the utilities into how your rent's gonna be, but I'm not sure how they do it.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's part of the calculation,
I
okay.
think somehow it's part of the calculation. But if you're living in subsidized housing or with a Section 8 voucher, you do pay your own utilities. But if you have zero income and you're living in subsidized housing, then you get a check. And I'm not sure how that works either, but you somehow you get a check that pays for your utilities, that you pay yourself out of that check. Yes.
Okay, question. If, let's say you have a client in Multnomah County with a Section 8 voucher, and they find an apartment in Washington County. How's that work?
Well, our organization only helps people in Multnomah County, but what that person would want to do is have their voucher transferred from Multnomah County to Washington County. So they would go back to their home forward worker to help them with that transfer.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's transferable?
Yes.
Oh, oh.
If you've lived in your apartment a certain amount of time,
I think once you've lived there a year,
Yeah.
then you can transfer.
Oh, okay.
and you want to make sure you transfer before you move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, 'cause you
Yeah,
get trouble.
the paperwork going ahead of time, yeah.
So what happens if you want to move into Multnomah County outside and you want to move into one of these apartments? How do they,
With the Section 8 voucher?
without a Section 8 voucher, are you able to help somebody who wants to move from
No,
a
if
different?
they're homeless, we can help them, but if they're currently on a rental agreement in a different county, then we aren't helping them.
Because you have to limit who you help.
Yes, yes,
Because of so much need.
yeah.
So do the other counties have agencies?
They do, and the thought is then to have Washington County and Clackamas County come in, but it's not as robust,
No.
nearly as robust as Northwest Pilot
No, we
Project, so
have
it
the
seemed
Northwest
good to
Pilot
have Northwest Pilot Project
Yeah.
on their own. But the other,
Northwest Pilot Project is known to really be able to help the tenants. Because, I think it's because also we have that private funding that gives us a lot of gray areas to use that money at our discretion. If we think that we can create a good, stable housing plan by paying 1 month rent when maybe it wouldn't qualify under the guidelines of federal funding, we can do that, and it's awesome. And we create a lot of really good, stable housing plans that way. Yeah.
A broader question.
Yeah.
You're like, I think of this sort of a lifeboat in a stormy sea where people are being bounced all over the place. Northwest Pilot Project I've used is a great organization, a lifeboat with a shelter on top. It's really cool. But you're still bouncing around in these stormy seas. What is being done, either by Northwest Pilot Project or others, to change the availability of housing through legislation, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot being done right now, and I don't know if you guys have seen a lot of the talk in the Oregonian about homelessness and affordable housing. So there's a lot of talk right now going on about building more affordable housing. And I can get you statistics and stuff like that and what's being done. It's not really my area of expertise, but Bobby at Northwest Pilot Project, he does that completely. But really, there's a lot more talk being done, but that is what needs to be done, is more affordable housing being built. Yeah. Yes.
So I don't know if this is your area, but now you have somebody homeless and you find them an apartment. Now what? They have no bed, no dishes, no...
So we can buy them a bed, and we have kitchen kits that have all the essentials for a kitchen that we give to people who
So
are
you
moving
do
into housing.
provide.
Yeah, and then the kitchen kits are gently used items. And then we have bedding kits that we provide for people that are all brand new. It's sheets, towels, comforters. We have people that make knit blankets and quilt comforters for us, pillows, shower curtain, all the basics that they'll need. We give those to people who are moving into housing.
That's great.
And you take donations for stuff like that, or you
Yeah.
purchase those stuff?
We take donations for the kitchen items. They're gently, well, for any of it.
Right.
But the bedding kits, we have those be all brand new stuff.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So if I have dishes and silverware and all, I can just drop it off and you would be happy
Yeah.
to get them?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where is your place?
We're on Broadway between Columbia and Clay.
What's the address?
Oh, it's 1430 Southwest Broadway, Suite 200. I can problem solve any kind of client situations that you have if you want.
Well, this is kind of a classic one. I'll just use the example I mentioned to you earlier, but just like, say someone calls us and they've gotten an eviction notice, and it's because of, blocking a heating unit in their apartment. The heating unit used to be turned off, but then they did a new heating system thing, and they said it has to be on, and your furniture has to be pulled out from it. It's a small apartment, the person doesn't want to do it. And so a personal advocate might be assigned to go in and work, as a neutral party in a conversation between the property manager and the resident. So do you have any tips on how to negotiate those kind of things?
Negotiate with the landlord?
Yeah, and we usually have a meeting with all three people, but I mean, you must deal with that sometimes where there's a conflict with the property manager.
Yeah, when there's conflicts, well, in that situation, I would meet with the tenant, and if he's having an issue with pulling out his furniture from the heating vent, I would try to figure out why. Is there a mental health issue going on? Some sort of situation like that where maybe you could have him get connected with counseling, and then maybe write a reasonable accommodation if he gets an eviction notice for it, based on his disability, and then based on the fact that he's going to counseling, and then call the landlord, ask if they can hold off, say we're working with him. A lot of times when we tell the landlords that we're working with this person, and can you hold off on this until we do whatever, a lot of times they'll do that, just by knowing that there's somebody trying to help this tenant.
Will, do you have an example? You probably do.
I was thinking this person that, it's a bed bug client, but what came out after the bed bug issue was taken care of was there was a real problem dealing with management. And the person is now debating, can I stay there or do I move? And they have a Section 8 voucher, as I understand. So they've talked to management. Management says, okay, we can fill out the paperwork to help you move and so on. Finding place is another thing. But there's a case where there's not just a dispute with the management. There's some indication that management in general is having problems with tenants.
So they're being unreasonable.
Being unreasonable, they kind of, one of these grouchy old folks kind of thing, there's not much of an attitude from several people. And we're debating, how do we deal with that? For the client thing, sit down with the manager is one thing. But when you get a problem with management, is there any kind of, aside from the obvious, just one-on-one mediation sort of thing, not even mediation, just getting together? Do you know of, does Northwest Pilot do management counseling or things like that?
A lot of times we'll try to stay out of some of the management issues because we want to be able to use them as a partner agency.
Yeah.
And so when it becomes a big issue like that where they're really being unreasonable, that's great that you guys can deal with it. We would maybe refer the tenant to the Community Alliance of Tenants and see if there's any Fair Housing Acts being broken. Just kind of go back to them and find out what the specific issues are. But I mean, for the most part, we have pretty good relationships with the management. And then Bobby at Northwest Pilot Project, who deals with a lot of the upper management and the owners of the buildings and stuff like that. So there are certain situations where we wouldn't really want to cause a big stink, because then it's really taking on all of that whole management company as a whole, and we don't want to be butting heads with them. We have to kind of pick and choose our battles as our agency.
Sure.
Yeah.
And butting heads never works really when you come down to it, but in sense of helping them understand the special needs of clients. Like,
Yeah.
we're dealing with older people, and we can deal with management and say, look, here's some things you may have to do with an older client you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
And work with it, because I agree, the getting people together so that they're feeling a win in the process
Yeah.
is essential.
Yeah.
The person's gonna live with these people, we're gonna go away.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Yes.
I've had 2 cases now, and it seems like the issue really started when new management came in and had to go through, and I don't know what the requirements are, but if you're coming up with this arrangement and you buy a new building or you come in as the new management, is there a requirement from the government that you upgrade everything at that point? I mean, 2 cases where people have been moved out because they have to, or at least the management has basically done all kinds of improvements, which is good, but it seems like in both cases, it's been the start of this downward trend. That people have lived in their apartments for 7 to 8 years. There's been, in their minds, a good relationship with the management, and then all of a sudden, the new guys come in on the block, and all things go to hell. They've been moved out. There isn't this reasonable the thing about moving the stuff. The old folks allow, in this particular case, both heaters to be turned off and stuff, furnishings to be such and such. New folks come in and said, oh, that's okay, but you have to keep this on, changing it up. So I'm just curious, when a new company comes in, new management company, are there certain requirements they are required to do by the government in order to continue that subsidized relationship?
When they're coming in as a new management company into a subsidized building, is that your
Yes,
question?
yes.
I don't think there's any different requirements for them as a new management company of that building. I think that maybe they're just choosing to be more picky, or, as we all know, some managers really just kind of can just be real jerks and really unreasonable and not flexible, Did that answer your question?
Well, I think they're new owners as well as just a management company.
I think one of the things we're seeing is that, in Portland, with the vacancy rate as low as it is, a lot of people are upgrading their buildings, want higher rents, and don't want to deal with people. And so often you'll see that there's a real movement to try to move them out. So this whole Eastern movement of older adults and people who need subsidies out of different areas.
Is that a particular subsidized building that you're talking about?
In both cases, at least the folks that we had, the clients were Section 8.
They had Section 8 vouchers, I mean?
I think so. The last fellow, the first one that you and I talked
Yeah.
about, had a Section 8, and
He didn't, though. The second guy doesn't, because now he's in fair market.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. He didn't, but the first one did, I think.
Might have been project-based, but yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm working with somebody right now that wants to move, and
Can you hear
I'm trying to speak up a little bit. He reported to me that he got a call about a month ago from an opening, and they quoted him $600 a month, and so he thought that was too much, and he turned it down. Well, he only has to pay 30%. So do the managers of these places know they have his application, they know what program he's on? Would they quote him that 30%, or would that be the full rent, or what would $600 be when they?
He's paying 30% of what his income is,
Yes.
not anything to do with the rental price.
So they know his income, because I helped him fill out some more applications, so they know. So when they call him, they are anticipating that he's going to enter on the programs,
With the Section 8 voucher. So he would pay 30% of what his income is, and then Home Forward pays the difference
Right.
up to the full rent amount.
So, okay, so they quoted him 600, that's what,
So 600 is the rent amount that, but he's only gonna pay 30% of what his income is, and then Home Forward pays the difference up to that 600.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't really understood what they were quoting him.
Okay.
So I will straighten him out.
He has a mobile voucher, he has a Section 8 voucher he can take
He
different
said he
places.
was on Home Forward, so after this meeting today, I'll quiz him a little bit more about, what's the method of his application
Yeah,
here.
he probably has a Section 8 voucher, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you have a question?
This might come up fairly often, I don't know. This is a woman who called because she was being charged late fees on her water utility. And she's in some kind of a facility. She's renting, and she pays only every 3 months. It's a big bill. It's like, $400 or $500.
Wow.
Well, she's sharing it with her, she's in a little duplex. She's sharing it with her friend. So, but anyway, it's a lot. She doesn't pay directly. She pays to somebody else, who then she thinks pays the property manager. She never sees the bill, actually, from the water company. And she never, and she says she doesn't. So the information comes through the management to her, and she pays the fellow that's the person that's right there in the property, and that person's not the owner. They pay they pay the bill then they send it to a real estate office, which must be the property manager. So I called the water department, I called the board, and he said, well, she shouldn't be having to pay late fees all the time.
That's right.
Somehow or other, it's not being done in a timely manner that it gets to her, so she gets it back. He said it shouldn't be that she has to pay that, the property manager should pay that. Now, it's not every single time, but it's every 3 months, so, it's a big stretch of time going on here.
So
So
when she gets that bill
what I told her
from
to
the
do,
management company, is she paying it late to them?
well, that's
It sounds like
the thing.
what she's doing.
The company said that we give 22 days leeway on the payment. So I told her, I didn't ask her whether she was paying late. I said, when it comes to you, write down, get someone to vouch that you're getting it on this particular date and that you're paying it on this particular date.
Yeah.
She doesn't get a receipt when she makes her payment to whoever she's giving the money to?
This
She
is a
should always
woman-
get at least a handwritten receipt.
Yeah, well,
every day.
anyway, that's what I told her to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like there are a few things that could be done
Yeah.
that you're already sort of investigating, first of all.